Hello, I'm Thomas Hare, Chief Content Officer at the Performance Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct-to-consumer marketing world. Welcome to the latest episode of Take 20, created by the PDMI's Brand Response Council. These 20-ish minute live conversations featuring leaders in the performance marketing world speaking about the hottest topics in the industry are scheduled twice a month. Before we get to today's conversation, a housekeeping note. We'll be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of today's session. You don't have to wait to ask them, though. Utilize the questions tab on your control panel to type and send your question in. We'll be collecting them and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of the episode. Today, we have the third in a recurring series on how performance marketers are reaching different generations of consumers. We're here to tackle what's been the buzziest group in recent years, Millennials. Born between the early 80s and the late 90s, the group recently surpassed baby boomers as the largest living generation in the US, with total spending power of more than $1.1 trillion. Millennials outspent boomers by nearly 20% on retail purchases last year. Capable and reachable across all media, how are performance marketers most effectively connecting with millennials, and how are they responding to marketing messaging? Like where and what are they buying? Brand Response Council Chair and Take 20 host Chris Foster of Modern Postcard is here, along with BB3 Advertising's Ariel Benz and Samsung Ads, Dan Grskovic. Welcome all. We're glad to have you here, Chris. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Thomas, for that introduction. And thank you, Dan and Ariel, for being here for your first Take 20. We're so excited to have you and want to jump in because the millennial generation all generations are fascinating. You have to believe that, but they're very unique in that they've got some different generational markers and experiences that are shared. So this is the generation, like Tom said, born between 1982 and 1996, approximately. Mark Zuckerberg and Taylor Swift and our guests are part of this illustrious group. And some of these large shared experiences and generational markers were 9/11, happening, right when the millennials were entering into that peak of adulthood. The BP oil spill, Occupy Wall Street, remember that? Legalized gay marriage came through. The iPhone, all these very major things that changed society. And not only that, they changed how we think about the cultural norms, and they change how you respond as you move through the world altogether as a generation. Also, this is the generation that came into college when many institutions were unprepared for that big surge that Tom mentioned about the population. It's just a big group. So that created greater scarcity within the higher ed institutions. And with that, the immutable laws of supply and demand impacted tuition rates, which rose faster than incomes. What does that mean? College debt. So this, plus the 2008 financial collapse right around the graduation and the housing shortage, you get this generation that has different financial challenges than other generations did, but they're still spenders. Right? They're still overcoming some of these challenges. They're still spending. They tend to spend more on travel, dining, and entertainment, more experiences rather than products. And of course, are natural online and subscription-based shoppers. So, there are generalities and there are ideas that come through, but in the end of the day, what I think DTC marketers want to know is, are there different nuances? Are there different things about this generation that we can learn and talk about so we can be more effective marketers to them and give them better experiences? So excited to have this conversation. Daniel, we're going to start with you. Are you seeing any buying trends from the Samsung ad network when millennial households are specifically targeted?
Yeah, for sure, Chris, and thanks for having me today. But as you mentioned in your intro, it's definitely a group focused more on that experiential lifestyle, right? Not so much looking for materialistic items always in marketing campaigns, but looking for travel, dining, and for those of us lucky enough to purchase a home before the housing crisis, maybe home upgrades or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely focused on mobile first transactions as well. They are, willing to do brick and mortar stores, especially to pick up items, but in a lot of cases, we are making purchases online via mobile phones first. So again, leaning into that, there's a lot of subscription and membership-based purchasing that goes on. Obviously, in the streaming world, a lot of people leaning into that, but also for other content and entertainment, whether it be audio, books. We've lived through that technological boom and kind of migrated with that wave to have our experiences digital first, but also, like I said, wanting to use our money to feel what the lifestyle may be, as opposed to just bringing more items into our households.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that one of the items, or one of the generational trends that sociologists are thinking about with millennials is that they saw their boomers, maybe their boomer Gen Xers ahead of them buy things, but maybe that actually really didn't provide the value that they wanted, right? It's the experiences and the memories and having these moments that are actually more important than the actual object. So I love that you touched on that, and those are the things that you're seeing. Ariel, when you're talking with clients and they're saying, gosh, this is the age group, this is what I want. When you advise them about media options, what are you recommending?
Yeah, so the biggest thing with millennials is that we need to meet them where they are. And right now, where they are spending a lot of their time is, of course, on streaming, but social media platforms. This is a generation that grew up essentially understanding what technology was. They understand how to use social media. They use it as a search engine. It's where they show up. It's where they discover new products. So when we're talking to clients that are looking for this demographic, we go with a digital first approach in the beginning, because what you need to be able to do is be authentically on social media in a way that they relate to. They are not really big on interruption as a form of advertising. So that traditional way of advertising that we've always used is not as effective. They can smell a sale from a mile away, and they're just not interested. So what we talk about with our clients is, how do we provide value and create content that resonates with this generation in a meaningful way, and of course making sure that that is on platforms that they're actually using.
Yeah, I love that. That's a wonderful insight, Ariel, in terms of talking about the authentic connection rather than being sold or purchased. Because remember, this is a generation that, through the financial collapse and through Occupy Wall Street and even the BP oil spill, had a marked distrust, perhaps, of companies, of institutions, right? Of a company being out for profit versus a connection. All these things create this environment to where you want to be connected to the brand you're buying from, not just to be sold, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the question that I would have for you, Dan, have there been messages or creative approaches, because we kind of talked about was the authentic connection that worked. Are you seeing creative approaches that are off target, that they really miss the mark with this generation?
Yeah, certainly. Certainly, if a brand is taking too much of a salesy approach, millennials are going to see right through that. But also, to your point, if it's disingenuous messaging, right, especially coming off the era of Occupy Wall Street and things like that, people want to see true value in the brands they're interacting with, whether it be their actual value proposition and what you're getting out of it, or the values that that brand stands for. So it's super important to this generation. We don't tend to overemphasize materialism too much at this point. Again, going back to that experiential purchases, we definitely want to see not too overly generic messaging coming through from brands. It has to kind of speak to who we are, what we're looking for, and align with our own values and life goals, honestly.
I love that. And Ariel, I'd love to have you touch on that, what Dan just said about, this is maybe that first generation that really focused on the values that brands stand for, maybe than just product. Have you seen that as well, in terms of how you create social posts to connect a brand's value versus the product?
Yeah, so people want to feel that they're purchasing something from somebody that has a similar value system to them. So that's where this whole idea of creating content, people that are using their own employees, talking about their story of how they've started their company, watching people actually building companies. This is the type of content that is doing extremely well right now in this space, because people feel that the brand not only is showing who it truly is, it gives a personality to the brand, but it also gives the brand an opportunity to share what their core values are in a way that we are sort of accustomed to as, you know, digital native buyers.
That's interesting, because one of the things that happens with Gen Z, and I don't know if it's with millennials too, is the attraction to niche brands, niche products itself. You know, I think of a brand like Burt's Bees, eventually purchased by Unilever. But Burt's Bees actually created a really loyal following. It was kind of a niche brand. You have, you know, I see in Target, you have Dr. Squash, you've got, you know, some of these, you know, brands that are trying not to look too big and trying to look niche and connected, you know, maybe to a founder's story, maybe to an employee's. Are those the kind of brands that are resonating?
That's what we're seeing a lot of success with. And it really comes down to that, you know, we want to know who's behind the brand. And I think that there's a real distrust with the larger brands. And they've made a lot of missteps. You know, if you think back to like the Kendall Jenner Pepsi faux pas that happened a few years ago, you know, where we're sitting there talking, we're trying, you know, agencies that are completely out of touch with what's going on are saying, hey, this is a great idea. I mean, this is topical, let's go with that. And the brand is doing it in a completely inauthentic way, and they can see right through it, and they don't appreciate it because we're not respecting the intelligence of this generation.
Right. To Ariel's point, you can YouTube, if you can find it. It's the Pepsi ad with, I think it's Kylie Jenner, right?
Kendall Jenner, I think.
Kendall. Sorry, I apologize. With Kendall Jenner. Anyway, I teach brand strategy at UCSD Extension, and we show that ad, and every time we show that ad, my students were like, what were they thinking? It's so obviously awful. And you can actually do an SNL, there's an SNL parody of the ad too, and you can YouTube that as well. But I think it gets exactly to what Ariel was talking about, that as millennials were growing up, they saw, they had reasons to distrust big company. They had reasons to distrust the motives behind big company, and the idea of having that more authentic story, a story that's connected, that's real, that there are people behind a brand, a founder or employee. I love that, Ariel. I think that's really insightful. I'll ask both of you the same question, and Dan, we'll start with you. You're both business leaders and you're consumers. I know you buy stuff every week. When you shop, Dan, what kinds of brands or marketing or user experiences turns you away from a purchase and conversely engages you in a purchase?
In terms of turning me away, if something isn't really filling a need for me at the time, right? We all have discretionary income, but with current economic headwinds, I think a lot of people are being careful with their dollars, right? So a brand really has to convey their true value proposition for me to lean into it, and make sure that I don't feel like my dollars are just going to waste. In terms of ones that I'm engaging with, that value prop is big, filling a need for me. And then again, going back to values, if a brand is out there and, you know, again, that corporate distrust, there's something about those smaller brands, or at least brands that can position themselves as being a little bit, you know, more of a mom and pop shop, or being truly connected down with, you know, that brick by brick approach in terms of building a business and connecting with their consumers. I think that definitely goes a long way in getting somebody like me to lean in, see what their brand is about, and see if it's something I want to align myself with.
Perfect. Ariel, I'm going to ask you the same question, but Dan, I'd like you to think about, and I'll throw this question out, you guys weren't prepared for this. I'd like you to think of a specific love mark brand, a brand that you absolutely love, and kind of why you tune into that. So Ariel, though, if you could ask the same question, what are the things that attract or maybe repel you from your own shopping experiences?
Yeah, so I probably shop a little bit more than Dan, I would have to guess, and I shop a lot on social. I'm a marketer, but I'm a complete sucker for marketing, and if I see good marketing, I always fall for it. It's pretty bad. But some of the brands that I'm really engaged with right now, being a millennial female, beauty brands on social. I think that beauty brands on social are doing a really great job. One of the comes to mind is Color Wow. They have a great founder story. They've really tuned into the nano influencer marketplace very early on, similar to like a Glossier and so on. And I think that those brands do a fantastic job at not only showcasing what their product does in a way that adds value. So you see it, you feel it, you do everything except for touch it, basically. And you have a really good understanding of what they're trying to convey. They make lots of content around their teams, around their products, around how that can fit into my lifestyle. And I think that that's super key for me. In terms of brands that are the messaging that doesn't really resonate, is normally when you see something overly produced or it's not native to the platform in which I'm currently shopping, right? So I love TV, right? We're a TV agency as well, but I don't want to see a TV ad on my social feed. It doesn't make sense, right? It's interrupting and it doesn't fit with what I'm looking for. What I do want to see is somebody actually trying that product on their skin or in their hair and seeing a real result of what happened with it. And in that way, sort of, instead of trying to sell me, showing me what the product can actually do for me.
I love that answer. You know, that's such a couple of things I want to key in on. One is that TV ad on social. I see a lot of YouTube pre-roll ads when I want to see highlights for EPL or something like that, and it looks like it should be on a big screen ad, like it's this esoteric. And I'm like, I just am counting down the seconds until I can skip away from it because it doesn't connect. I think that's really insightful of you. You did mention something that I haven't heard before, and I'd love you to dive in a little bit if you could. You said nano influencer. What does that actually mean?
So nano influencer is sort of the smallest following category when we look at influencer marketing. So nano generally have under 10,000 followers. And then you have your micro, which is your 10,000 to about 100,000. So those two types of influencers are really key for delivering fantastic results in the social space. Nano influencers very specifically because of the fact that they have a two-way relationship, and that's something that especially millennials expect from brands, and they expect it from their influencers. With under 10,000, there's a very strong chance you're actually sending messages to that person, you're commenting regularly on their content. There's a close relationship there. When you get into that sort of mega influencer space, which gets you fantastic visibility, you don't comment, you don't interact with that because you don't have that relationship with them. You view them as entertainment as opposed to somebody who's actually giving you advice. So that sort of nano influencer is hugely valuable to brands.
I love it. That's great. So Dan, I'd like to touch on that too. Dan, are you involved with TikTok, Instagram? Are you engaged in that personally as a consumer and shopper?
I am.
And do you shop on social as well?
Occasionally. It really takes a product to cut through the clutter. And again, going back to filling that need, right? I tend not to fall for the traps of, oh, this may serve a purpose for a day or two, but isn't going to be a long-term solution for something in my life. So while I do keep my eye out on products that are coming across my social feeds, I am a little bit picky about which ones I am going to purchase from or even just interact with.
Cool, I love it. So Dan, I'll stick with you if you don't mind. Do you have a love mark brand? Do you have a brand that you absolutely love that you have a relationship with that's part of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a bit of an audiophile. So whether it be stereo setup or down to the headphones I'm using, I'm pretty invested in that, right? And there is a brand here in the US called ZMF headphones. And going back to Ariel's point about nano influencers, this is a brand where you can actually interact with the owners of the company. They make their products here in the USA. They show you the step-by-step process of how their headphones come together, the resources that they're sourcing to go into their components. So it's giving you an inside look at that true value proposition. And again, access to the owners, whether you're interacting with them on social media, or if you go to the trade shows where they display their products, the owners are usually there and you can go up and shake their hand, ask them questions and interact with that way. So again, it goes a long way with that personal touch that I think, again, cuts through the clutter of all the million brands that are being served to you via the socials and gives you something tangible to grab onto.
Yeah, that is what I love about that example. And thank you, Dan, for sharing that, because that's exactly what we're talking about, a real authentic connection between the consumer and the product, and knowing that the product and or brand is fueled by a person that you believe in. right? And then actually to meet that person at a trade show or to interact via social. And then now you're loyal. You're an absolutely loyal, is it ZM or ZN?
ZMF.
A ZMF, right? So now you're going to be a ZMF headphones. Do you have children, Dan?
I do. I have two.
My hunch is that they're going to be ZMF headphones buyers for their whole lives. Absolutely. Why wouldn't they? Right? Because you're going to talk with them about it. They're going to put on their, and their eyes will go wide when they listen to something that they love, and they're going to fall into that brand just like you did for all the right reasons. I think that's wonderful. Ariel, do you have a love mark brand?
Oh, I have so many. I'm like, again, going back to probably bad shopping habits. Yeah, I tend to be using a lot of products in the like skincare and beauty space, and I think that where we go back to is probably Glossier, Color Wow. I'm not sure if there's any other brand recently outside of beauty that I can speak to, unfortunately. I think that's probably what's got my attention, and that's also where a lot of our clients live. So I think that probably it's 50% of my feed. So that's probably why I get all those.
Well, it's part of your feed, and if you did buy from that and you shop that and you looked at those sneaky, clever little AI algorithms are feeding you more of that because they want to feed you what you want to eat. That's true. That's excellent. So I've got one final question for each of you. If you have a brand that seems a perfect fit, so Dan, you talked about ZMF, for example, what would you advise them in terms of media choices? And to connect to that user?
I think a lot of marketers sometimes expect immediate results on their campaigns, right? But you got to keep in mind, you have to push people down that consideration funnel to get them to finally pull the trigger. So I recommend hitting people on multiple touch points, retargeting those folks and drilling that messaging home without becoming too intrusive. There's a fine balance there. But you have to hit people in multiple areas to keep that messaging top of mind, to get first their attention, then drive them towards their consideration before they finally are willing to make that purchase. So on Samsung TVs, for example, just to speak about our own offerings.
Yeah.
We have our first screen inventory that you could reach all Samsung TV users across the US and hit people with that messaging as soon as they turn that TV on. And then you can retarget them within our CTV video offering and hit them with that messaging again. And I think it goes a long way for people when they realize that, oh, this brand isn't trying to inundate me, but they're trying to meet me where I am. And again, stay consistent with that. It feels like, okay, they're really trying to reach me. I must be in their target audience. So maybe I'll give this a little bit more attention than I normally would with a lot of these brands that are just blasting you a messaging from all angles.
Yeah, I love it because you said exactly what Ariel said at the first top of the show about meeting the user where they are, meeting the customer where they are. Ariel, what kinds of media do you recommend for a brand like Glossier or Color Wow? If Color Wow gave you a call and said, "Hey, Ariel, we need some help reaching our target audience," what would you tell them?
Yeah, so actually, there's a lot of great platforms out there, and there's a lot of great media to buy. To Dan's point, there is obviously a real need to be on multiple platforms. So cross-platform advertising is imperative for any generation, quite frankly, but especially for the millennials. So we tend to recommend CTV, for example, with retargeting, because that is incredibly effective if they are ready to go on the big screen. If they're not ready to scale up to that space yet, we do start with a digital first. We look at everything as a media agnostic review when we first start with clients, and we kind of want to make sure you've got a really solid social foundation. You've got influencers working, you've got your paid, you've got your digital in order, and if they've got all of those pieces and they're ready to take that next step, CTV becomes the next big way to scale your brand because you're getting a much better audience. But also because of the fact that you're able to use that first party data with CTV, and that goes back to the core messaging that we're using and meeting them where they are and making sure that you're giving the right kind of ad to the right person. And that's so important to the millennial consumer, and that's something that CTV does incredibly well.
Yeah, the CTV technology, I think, is a perfectly placed for that kind of marketing because it gets the power of television, but the targetability of digital. So it's a perfect fit channel for that type of marketing. That's wonderful. Well, like we talked about, we're already way past time, which is awesome because you two are incredible. And Thomas, I'd love to get some questions from the audience.
We got some good ones, so we'll try to rifle through them as quickly as we can, and can get everybody out of here on a reasonable time frame. First one, we're living in kind of charged political times, as we all know. eMarketer put out a story this week where they referenced the Harris poll, and millennials, 46% of millennials say that they have, are, or will participate in an economic boycott. That puts them second just behind Gen Z, but well ahead of Gen X and baby boomers. Is there, I don't know if concern's the right word. Is there a certain kind of messaging that you need to avoid or you need to lean into given the social consciousness of this generation?
Happy to jump in here.
Yeah.
Going back to like brands that overemphasizing materialism right now, right? Considering the amount of economic turmoil millennials have been through, right, dating back to the 08 crisis, what we're dealing with currently, people are aware of where their money is going and aware of the types of brands we're supporting, right? So if we feel like it just doesn't align with our lived experience, it's not something we're going to be quick to pull out our wallet for sure.
Yeah, and I would say we probably tend to steer clear of political discourse because it can be incredibly polarizing. We also tend to steer clear of placing around political discourse, to be fair, because of the fact that, listen, we're also bombarded with so much information. This is a generation that's getting information from multiple sources all the time. We have data in a way that we've never had in previous generations at this age. So I think that, staying away from those conversations and really focusing back on that value and how this fits into the person's life is really kind of the messaging that we stay on with our clients.
That makes sense. This next one's for you, Ariel. It's basically straight up opinion. Are millennials more loyal to the influencers they follow or the brands they buy from?
Very good question. I think that it's probably the influencer to start. So it's, the first taste is free. You've got to use the influencer to basically cut through the noise to get to the consumer, but then it's on the brand to have that experience, to follow that experience. So like when we're placing brands with influencers, one of the things we have to find is an influencer that fits into that brand ethos, so that when that first message and first touch point gets to them and then they go to the brand, that experience translates. And if you do that well, and if you do have that, then they will have loyalty, obviously, to their influencer who they probably follow and they have, a great relationship with, but then that will turn into that same brand loyalty if the brand is able to fulfill.
Makes sense. Dan, here's one for you. Where are members of this generation activating most consistently on Samsung's opportunities? What, if anything, can brands learn from that?
In terms of like seeing a message and how they're responding to it?
Yeah, I think that's what they're getting at.
First things people are going to do is pull out their phone, right? Pairing a strong message with a strong landing point can go a long way. Again, people are aware of the experience, the overall experience that drives you towards a product. So that, it's definitely a fine balance in terms of catching people's attention, but not turning them off in terms of driving them to your end result. You can go wrong a lot of ways, especially in the current social conditions. So just being considerate of people's tastes and things like that, especially when millennials is super important.
Makes sense. Last one, and I think both of you guys will have some thoughts on this. Can brands make traditional linear TV work for millennials, or should they spend their budgets on new media like CTV or social to chase this group?
I'll start off with that one. Yes, you can still make linear television work for this generation, absolutely. Don't know if it will go beyond this generation. It's a smaller audience, okay? So you're not going to reach them in the same way, and you're not going to be able to have that multi-touch experience that is so wanted, I think, by this generation that CTV can deliver. That being able to get that remarketing, being able to know that we've got that, and now we can actually take you through other steps and make sure we're catching you on all of your screens as you go through your multi-touch campaign. But linear is still working. I would say that is phasing out for this generation, unfortunately. It is fairly limited in terms of the reach.
Makes sense.
This flow is going to be those, big sporting events that may not be available via streaming now, or even just family viewing of certain shows or events on TV that still brings the entire family together. But yeah, certainly, to Ariel's point, other methods are more effective at this point.
Makes sense.
You mean like a live Knicks playoff sporting event?
That might be it.
Something like that.
Hey, thanks everybody. We are out of time, but we appreciate Dan, Ariel, was Chris to have you here. Really great conversation and really thoughtful. Not surprising, all three of these folks have been involved with PDMI's efforts up on stage, PDMIU, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So thank you all for your expertise. Our next Take 20 episode is set for 2 weeks from today, Wednesday, May 14th. We'll host a group of analytics experts to discuss the latest in media measurement and research. Please visit thepdmi.com/take-20 to register for the webinar and check out the upcoming schedule. Additionally, we're excited to announce the launch of PDMI University, the association's comprehensive online continuing education program for performance and D2C marketing professionals. Both Chris and Ariel are instructors at PDMIU, and we thank you for your service. You want to hear more Ariel talk more about nano and micro influencers, among other things? Join us at PDMIU. We opened the doors today by launching 4 of an eventual 10 courses. It's an all-inclusive opportunity. The full range of 10 courses is available for $395 for PDMI members and $595 for non-members. For more information or to enroll now, visit thepdmi.com/university. And last thing, online registration for PDMI West in San Diego is open. Badges are priced at $395 for PDMI members and $595 for non-members. It's a $100 discount from on-site registration. And badge holders get first crack at discount hotel rooms in the PDMI's block at the Intercontinental San Diego, our host hotel. Visit thepdmi.com/PDMI-West to find out more and get your badge now. Thanks again to all of you for being here. Ariel, Chris, Dan, thank you once again. We appreciate it. Be well. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.